I am back from StokerCon. I'm exhausted, but Dr. McCoy and I both have our swag bags. I've got my con t-shirt, and I've got stories. So for those of you who don't know, StokerCon is the annual conference put on by the Horror Writers Association, the professional organization for horror writers. And this year, StokerCon was held at the Curtis Hotel in downtown Denver, Colorado, and of course I attended. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you a play-by-play of the entire con. That would be boring as hell for you, and there's stuff that I don't particularly care to talk about. A lot of the con for me was really not so much about the events themselves, but more about just catching up with old friends and making new friends and doing some business around the hotel bar. But there are some things that I think may be of interest to a general audience, and those are the things I'm going to talk about. One of those things I want to talk about is the Bram Stoker Awards. On Saturday evening, the con hosted the Bram Stoker Awards Banquet, giving away the Bram Stoker Award, named for Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula. And this is the Horror Writers Association's award given for best achievement in a variety of different categories for horror writing. I attended said banquet, and I have the news, the results of the Bram Stoker Awards. Of course, you can read the results elsewhere, but for those of you who haven't yet seen the announcements of who won, I have my lists of nominees and winners. So I'm going to have to consult my notes for this, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through, in brief format, the presentation of the Bram Stoker Awards, in the order that they were given during the banquet. So the first award given was for Superior Achievement in Non-Fiction. These are book-length non-fiction works, and the nominees were Michael Nost for Writer's Workshop of Horror 2 from Hydra Publications, Daniel Olson for 9/11 Gothic, Decrypting Ghosts and Trauma in New York City's Terrorism Novels from Lexington Books, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock and Regina M. Hansen for Giving the Devil His Due, Satan and Cinema by Fordham University Press, Kevin J. Whitmore Jr. for Eaters of the Dead, Myths and Realities of Cannibal Monsters from Reaction Books, and Christopher Woofter for Shirley Jackson, A Companion by Peter Lang Publishing. And the winner of that award was Michael Nost for Writer's Workshop of Horror 2, again from Hydra Publications. From the publisher's description of that book, Writer's Workshop of Horror 2 is a collection of essays and interviews focusing on the art and craft of writing horror and dark fantasy. From best-selling authors like Stephen King, Anne Rice, and R.L. Stine to up-and-coming writers just making their mark, this anthology is chock full of advice and information writers of any level will find valuable and useful. Writer's Workshop of Horror 2 is helmed by Michael Nost, the Bram Stoker Award-winning editor that brought you Writer's Workshop of Horror, Writer's Workshop of Science Fiction and Fantasy, and Author's Guide to Marketing with Teeth. So Michael won another Bram Stoker Award for Writer's Workshop of Horror 2. I've read the first of those books, and it was excellent. I have not yet read Writer's Workshop of Horror 2, but it's certainly on my must-read list. The next award was for Superior Achievement in a Poetry Collection. The nominees were Joe R. Lansdale for Apache Witch and Other Poetic Observations, put out by Independent Legions Publishing, Jessica McHugh for Strange Nests from Apocrypha, Marge Simon and Mary Terzio for Victims by Weasel Press, Christina Singh, Angela Yuriko Smith, Lee Murray, and Genevieve Flynn for Tortured Willows, Bent, Bowed, and Unbroken from Yuriko Publishing, and Lucy A. Snyder for Exposed Nerves, put out by Raw Dog Screaming Press. And in that case, the winner was Christina Singh, Angela Yuriko Smith, Lee Murray, and Genevieve Flynn for Tortured Willows, Bent, Bowed, Unbroken from Yuriko Publishing. Another one that I haven't read, but I did arrange to read the publisher's description for you, which says, "The willow is femininity, desire, death, rebirth. With its ability to grow from a single broken branch, it is the living embodiment of immortality. It is the yin that wards off malevolent spirits. It is both revered and shunned." In Tortured Willows, 4 Southeast Asian women writers of horror expand on the exploration of otherness begun with the Bram Stoker Award-winning anthology Black Cranes, Tales of Unquiet Women. Like the willow, women have bent and bowed under the expectations and duty heaped upon them. Like the willow, they endure and refuse to break. With exquisite poetry, Christina Singh, Angela Yuriko Smith, Lee Murray, and Genevieve Flynn invite you to sit beneath the tortured willow's gravid branches and listen to the uneasy shiver of its leaves. Again, I have not read that poetry collection. It sounds intriguing, and it did win the Bram Stoker Award, which is a ringing endorsement of any work. The next category was for Superior Achievement in a Graphic Novel, and the nominees were Saladin Ahmed and Sami Kavela for Abbott 1973 by Boom Studios, Cami Garcia, Miko Swayan, Jason Badower, and Mike Mayhew for Joker Harley Criminal Sanity, DC Comics, Alessandro Manzetti and Stefano Cardoselli for The Inhabitant of the Lake, Independent Legions Publishing, Grant Morrison, Alex Child, and Naomi Franquis for Proctor Valley Road, again Boom Studios, and finally Dan Panosian and Mariana Ignazzi for An Unkindness of Ravens, again from Boom Studios. The Bram Stoker Award in that case went to Alessandro Manzetti and Stefano Cardoselli for The Inhabitant of the Lake from Independent Legions Publishing. And I should point out that in this case, Alessandro Manzetti was the author and Stefano Cardoselli was author and artist, because this was a graphic novel, so they recognized both the authors and the artists, because both the writing of the script and the art that goes into it make graphic novels what they are. The Inhabitant of the Lake is another one that I've not yet read, but my understanding is it's a graphic novel adaptation of a Lovecraftian short story written by Ramsey Campbell in, 1962. And according to the publisher's description of the graphic novel, a young artist escapes the crowded city to create in the peace and quiet of his new home in a remote, abandoned area. Drawn to the solitude and atmosphere of the thick woods and large, dark lake, he has no idea that far from being alone, he in fact has many, many new neighbors. Strange beings stare across at his home from behind the shadowed tree line, and he can't shake the sense that something in the lake is watching him. When Cartwright's dreams turn dark and vivid, he discovers a set of arcane books titled The Revelations of Glaaki and realizes at last how much danger he faces. The presence in the lake is an ancient one of cosmic terror, and its servants, beset with the green decay, are beckoning him to join them as Glaaki, the three-eyed being crashed to Earth from outer space, rises again from the depths of the ebon lake. So that sounds like a really good read as well. I'm not a huge graphic novel guy, I just like to read them on occasion, but again, a Bram Stoker Award winner is sure to go right to the top of my list. The next category was for Superior Achievement in Short Nonfiction, and the nominees were Dion Ognjanovich for The Three Paradigms of Horror. That was in Vesterian Volume 4, Issue 2 from Grimscribe Press. Cindy O'Quinn for One and Done, which was in Weretales, a Shapeshifters Anthology from Brigid's Gate Press. Emily Ruth Verona for A Horror Fan's Guide to Surviving Womanhood from thefinalgirls.co.uk. Kevin J. Wetmore Jr. for Devil's Advocates, The Conjuring. That was by Auteur Publishing and Liverpool University Press. And finally, Angela Yuriko Smith for Horror Writers, Architects of Hope, and that was in The Siren's Call, Halloween 2021, Issue 55, Siren's Call Publishing. And the Bram Stoker Award went to Angela Yuriko Smith for Horror Writers, Architects of Hope. And this was short nonfiction, and I've not read that particular magazine, so I don't know much about it. But based on the title and what I heard during the awards ceremony, it seems like something with which I am likely to agree, in that horror writers are a hopeful sort of people, and I've said on this channel before, I think the horror genre is something of a hopeful genre. People who don't read a lot of horror don't understand that, but there's usually some hope contained within our dark nightmares and fantasies. Moving right along, the next category was for Superior Achievement in a Young Adult Novel, and the nominees were Kendare Blake for All These Bodies, Quiltree Books, R.L. Boyle for The Book of the Baku, Titan Books, Jessica Lewis, Bad Witch Burning, Delacorte Press, Crystal Sutherland, House of Hollow, G.P. Putnam's Sons, and Erica Waters for The River Has Teeth by Harper Teen. And the award went to Erica Waters for The River Has Teeth. Another one I've not read. Again, not much of a young adult reader, although I will read particularly a Stoker winner. The publisher's description, though, says, when Natasha's sister disappears, Natasha desperately turns to Della, a local girl rumored to be a witch, in the hopes that magic will bring her sister home. But Della has her own secrets to hide. She thinks the beast who's responsible for the disappearance is her own mother, who was turned into a terrible monster by magic gone wrong. Natasha is angry. Della has little to lose. Both are each other's only hope. And the next category is one that I'm particularly fond of because I think it's overlooked by a lot of other awards programs, and that is for superior achievement in a first novel. I like that they specifically set aside a category for debut novels because a lot of times it's hard for a first-time author to establish himself or herself in an awards program when competing against hardened veterans who've been at it for decades. So I really like that this is a category. The nominees this year were S. Alessandro Martinez for Helminth, published by Omnium Gatherum, Latanya McQueen for When the Reckoning Comes, from Harper Perennial, Terry Miles for Rabbits, from Del Rey, Haley Piper for Queen of Teeth, from Strange House Books, Lisa Quigley for The Forest, put out by Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Nicole Wilson for Tidepool, published by the Parliament House. And the award for first novel went to Haley Piper for Queen of Teeth. Another one I haven't read, but I've arranged to read you the description, which says, within 48 hours, Yaya Betancourt will go from discovering teeth between her thighs to being hunted by one of the most powerful corporations in America. She assumes the vagina dentata is a side effect of a rare genetic condition caused by Alpha Beta Pharmaceutical decades ago, when she and several thousand others were still in the womb. But when ABP corporate goons upend her life, she realizes her secondary teeth might be evidence of a new experiment for which she's the most advanced test tube. A situation worsened when Yaya's condition sprouts horns, tentacles, and a mind of its own. On the run and transforming, Yaya may be either ABP's greatest success or the deadliest failure science has ever created. Which sounds like quite an interesting novel, does it not? And the next category is for superior achievement in long fiction. These are works that are longer than a short story, but not a full-length novel, so novelettes, novellas, that sort of length. The nominees were V. Castro for Goddess of Filth, from Creature Publishing LLC, Cassandra Caw for Nothing But Blackened Teeth, put out by Tor Nightfire, Eric LaRocca for Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, put out by Weird Punk Books, again Haley Piper for Recitation of the First Feeding, which was in Unfortunate Elements of My Anatomy, put out by The Seventh Terrace, and Jeff Strand for 20th Anniversary Screening, which was in Slice and Dice, which was independently published. And the Bram Stoker Award went to Jeff Strand for 20th Anniversary Screening. And the description on this one says, this mockumentary-style dark comedy recounts the grisly events surrounding the terrible slasher flick The Roofer, remembered only because an obsessed fan tried to reenact the murders as they played out on the screen. When the same theater shows the film 20 years later, will the warnings that this is a really, really bad idea be justified? I've not read that particular work, but I always like Jeff Strand's work, so I'm looking forward to checking that one out. And that was followed by Superior Achievement in a Fiction Collection, collections of short stories. The nominees were Gemma Files for In That Endlessness Our End, put out by Grimscribe Press, Philip Fracassi for Beneath a Pale Sky by Lethe Press, Jonathan Mayberry for Empty Graves, Tales of the Living Dead, put out by Wordfire Press LLC, Lisa Tuttle for The Dead Hours of Night by Valancourt Books, and A.C. Wise for The Ghost Sequences, put out by Undertow Publications. And the Bram Stoker Award in this case went to Gemma Files for In That Endlessness Our End, put out by Grimscribe Press. And of that book, the publisher's description tells us the following. Come closer, friend, let me tell you a story. Heard the one about the Airbnb that eats your dreams, or the iron-crowned king who preys on his own bloodline from the air, still smoldering centuries after being burnt alive? How about the cloudy antique bottle you can wish your excess rage inside, or that crooked alley down which something waits to replace your disappointing child with a far more pleasant facsimile? We all know the truth, especially in times like these. In an anxiety-ridden, sleepless world such as ours, it's only ever our very worst dreams that come true. Here streets empty out and people pull themselves apart like amoebas, breeding murderous doppelgangers from their own flesh. Houses haunt, ideas possess, and a cold alien mood stares down, whispering that it's time to spawn. New myths rise and ancient evils descend, from the seemingly mundane terrors of a city just like yours, to all the most dark and distant places of a truly terrible universe. Nothing is as it seems. Not even that dimly recalled cinematic memory you've been chasing all these years. The one you think might just be something you stumbled upon while flipping through the channels after midnight. The one that still disturbs you enough to raise a cold sweat all over your body whenever you tried to will its details clear. Hot on the heels of her 2018 This Is Horror award-winning short story collection Spectral Evidence, critically acclaimed horror author Phobophile compiles 15 more of her most startling recent nightmares, a creepily seductive downward spiral of dark poetry and existential dread entirely suitable to the slow apocalypse going on all around us. So take your mind off your troubles and send it somewhere the rules still operate, if only to punish those who violate them. And about that I will say, as I said on some of these other ones, I've not read this particular work, but I've read Phobophile's before. Always a good read, and I'm sure this is no exception. And that brings us to superior achievement in an anthology. And the nominees in this case are the editors of the anthologies, and they are James Chambers for Under Twin Suns, Alternate Histories of the Yellow Sign, put out by Hippocampus Press. Ellen Datlow for When Things Get Dark, stories inspired by Shirley Jackson from Titan Books. Aaron J. French and Jess Landry for There Is No Death, There Are No Dead, put out by Crystal Lake Publishing. Eric J. Guignard for Professor Charlatan Bardot's travel anthology to the most fictional haunted buildings in the weird wild world, put out by Dark Moon Books, and I did that all in one breath, thank you very much. And finally, Eugene Johnson for Attack from the 80s, put out by Raw Dog Screaming Press. And the Stoker in this case went to Ellen Datlow for When Things Get Dark, stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. The publisher's description on this one says, a collection of new and exclusive short stories inspired by and in tribute to Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson is a seminal writer of horror and mystery fiction whose legacy resonates globally today. Chilling, human, poignant, and strange, her stories have inspired a generation of writers and readers. This anthology, edited by legendary horror editor Ellen Datlow, that's the truth, will bring together today's leading horror writers to offer their own personal tribute to the work of Shirley Jackson. Featuring Joyce Carol Oates, Josh Mallerman, Carmen Maria Machado, Paul Tremblay, Richard Kadri, Stephen Graham Jones, Elizabeth Hand, Kelly Link, Cassandra Caw, Karen Hewler, Benjamin Percy, John Langan, Laird Barron, Jeffrey Ford, M. Rickard, Shannon McGuire, Phobophiles, and Genevieve Valentine. So, Datlow's anthologies are always very well curated, and anything inspired by Shirley Jackson is sure to be intriguing. We are almost to the end. The next award was for Superior Achievement in Short Fiction. The nominees were Carol Geisander for The Yellow Crown, which was in Under Twin Suns, Alternate Histories of the Yellow Sign by Hippocampus Press. Lee Murray for Permanent Damage in Attack from the 80s, Raw Dog Screaming Press. Cindy O'Quinn for A Gathering at the Mountain in The Bad Book from Bleeding Edge Books. Anna Taborska for Two Shakes of a Dead Lamb's Tale in Terror Tales of the Scottish Lowlands from Telos Publishing. And Kyla Lee Ward for A Whisper in the Death Pit, which was in Weird Book 44 from Wildside Press. The Stoker in this case went to Lee Murray for Permanent Damage. This is a short story that I've not read. It's in an anthology that I haven't read, and because it's a short story, I wasn't really able to find a whole lot of information or description, but it should be a good read. I'll be sure to track it down at some point. Next, the penultimate category is for Superior Achievement in a Screenplay. The nominees were C. Henry Chasen, Nick Antosca, and Scott Cooper for Antlers, which was Searchlight Pictures; Hwang Dong-hyuk for Squid Game, Season 1, Episode 1, Red Light, Green Light, from Siren Pictures; Mike Flanagan, James Flanagan, and Jeff Howard for Midnight Mass, Season 1, Episode 6, Book 6, Acts of the Apostles, from Intrepid Pictures; Phil Graziadei and Lee Janiak for Fear Street Part 1, 1994, by Chernin Entertainment; and Jordan Peele, Win Rosenfeld, and Nia DaCosta for Candyman from Universal Pictures. And the Bram Stoker Award went to Mike Flanagan, James Flanagan, and Jeff Howard for Midnight Mass, Season 1, Episode 6, Book 6, Acts of the Apostles. That one I'm really pleased with. I had seen all of the films or TV shows that were nominated, and they were all good, but I think Midnight Mass was the best. And at the banquet, I happened to be sitting at the same table as Jamie Flanagan, whose brother Mike Flanagan was the director of the program, and they both had writing credits. When the award was giving out, I was sitting at the table, and it was a fairly exciting moment, because I think a lot of people were expecting the award to go a different way, but I think the voters got it right, and I think the Bram Stoker Award went to the right show or the right movie. And finally, the one that I think most people are waiting for was Superior Achievement in a Novel. The nominees were V. Castro for The Queen of the Cicadas from Flame Tree Press, Grady Hendrix for The Final Girl Support Group from Berkeley, Stephen Graham Jones for My Heart is a Chainsaw from Gallery Saga Press, Cynthia Paleo for Children of Chicago from Agora Books, and Chuck Wendig for The Book of Accidents. And the Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel went to Stephen Graham Jones for My Heart is a Chainsaw. Unfortunately, Stephen Graham Jones, though he was expected to attend StokerCon, actually wasn't in attendance to accept the award himself because he caught COVID and had to stay home under quarantine, so he couldn't be with us. But I've read the book, and I've read most of those books. I haven't read quite all of them, so I can't say 100% I'm sure that that was the best. But I did mention My Heart is a Chainsaw in my list of my favorite books from 2021, so I'm certainly not surprised that it won. I think it is a well-deserved award. In addition to those awards, there were a few others. There was a Specialty Press Award, which went to Valancourt Books. The Mentor of the Year Award went to Michael Nost. The Silver Hammer Award for volunteer work supporting the Horror Writers Association went to Kevin J. Whitmore Jr. 3 Lifetime Achievement Awards went to Joe Fletcher, Nancy Holder, and Koji Suzuki. Koji Suzuki is the creator of Ringu, which was Americanized as The Ring. And then there was the President Awards, given out by HWA President John Palisano, and that went to Sumiko Salson. So those were the awards, and the con was great. I think in terms of con events, that was the real highlight. There was a lot of other good stuff. There were great panels and short films and all kinds of things. But for me, really the highlights were the awards banquet and then just catching up with people, hanging out at the hotel bar, talking to people, doing some business, getting some ideas, doing some networking, and just generally having a good time with a really good group of people, because horror writers are a really good group of people. But because I know people also like the book haul videos and just to see what sorts of new treasures I've got, I'll also point out some of the wonderful treasures that I've received. Beginning, of course, with this t-shirt I already mentioned, which says StokerCon Denver 2022, and of course the swag bags. I've got my badge tucked away in this one, along with my banquet ticket. The big thing out of the swag bags was this. This is the souvenir book, which has essays and memorials of people we've lost over the last year. It has all of the nominees of the Stoker Awards. Lots of great stuff in here. This was edited by Cynthia Paleo. It's a beautiful book. The cover was done by Keelan Patrick Burke, who is an author as well as a graphic designer, and I've known his writing. I've not known his graphic design necessarily, but it's very well done here. I mean, just looking through this thing, it's a very attractive book, so this is a treasure. Of course, I'm just back from the con. I haven't had a chance to actually read the whole thing yet, but I'm looking forward to doing so. And then the swag bags also came with just some assorted other little papers and things. There were some masks for those who wanted them. There are some advertising for some books, and a sticker from Nightfire, that sort of stuff. The bag itself and the book, and actually the t-shirt, which wasn't in the bag but was included, were the real treasures of the swag bag stuff. And yes, I did get an extra one for Dr. McCoy. It has the same stuff in it. And as you can see, I got plenty of other wonderful book swag while I was there as well. In addition to some non-book stuff, a lot of which I'm not going to show you just because it's business cards and flyers and paper stuff that you're not really going to care about, although I did get a lot of that kind of stuff. But the interesting things are here. The first, just as a passing note, I actually skipped out of the con on the Friday evening to go across the street. It happened to be just across the street from the Opera House. So I went and saw Carmen. That was just across the street, and I've got my program from that. Also in the non-book realm, pardon me, Dr. McCoy, I got this mug from the Denver Horror Collective. And then the rest of it is pretty much books and graphic novels and short stories and those kinds of things. So I'm not going to describe all of these in detail. There's way too many for me to do that. That would take me the rest of the day. I'm just going to kind of go through and show you what I've got. Hopefully just seeing the titles and covers and authors' names will give you some inkling that maybe you want to pick up some of these books. So of those, the first is this little chapbook from Megan E. Hart. It's called Whatever You Want Most. It's just a short story. This was one of the free giveaways. Not read it yet, but that's a nice thing. Also among the free giveaways was this advanced reading copy of a comic book called Where Black Stars Rise. This is by Nadia Shamus and Marie Inger. Also in advanced copies, these are books that are not out yet but will be soon. I picked up one of Moonless Nocturne by Hank Schwabel, and this should be out in September of 2022. I also got Don't Go to Sleep by Bryce Moore. This one, it looks like, will be out on August 2nd, 2022. I have an advanced copy of the new Darcy Coates book, From Below, coming 6/7/22. The advanced copy of Always the First to Die by R.J. Jacobs, coming on September 13th, 2022. And an advanced copy of They Drown Our Daughters by Katrina Monroe, who was actually present and signed this for me. This one will be out on July 12th, 2022. Among not signed copies, I picked up Chuck Wendig's book Wanderers and The Fervor by Alma Katsu. Alma Katsu was going to be there, but ended up not being able to make it. I picked up her new book anyway, and I'm currently reading Chuck Wendig's book, The Book of Accidents, which was one of the nominated books for Best Novel. Haven't finished it yet, but I have been enjoying it, and I picked up the new one anyway. And next, I picked up this brand new short story collection called What Remains When the Stars Burn Out. This is by P.L. McMillan, who is a friend of mine and a member of my writers group, so this is a signed copy. I actually want to point this one out because she went to the trouble to draw this lovely little Mothman in the inscription, and I quite liked that. She also gave me this little envelope that came with a couple of pins as a free gift, so this is a treasure. And while I was there, I ran across John Skip, who will be known to many of you. And he was kind enough to autograph my copy of Spore, which he co-wrote with Cody Goodfellow. And I also picked up this album called The Antidote to Fear, because in addition to being an author, he's also a musician and a filmmaker and God knows everything else. He does a million different things. Haven't had a chance to listen to this yet, but I was curious to check out his album, so I picked up this, and he was kind enough to sign that as well. If you like Bizarro, you are probably familiar with Carlton Mellick III. I picked up a copy of his book Apeshit. Also, he autographed for me. Most of these are autographed. I'm not going to say that about all of them. I'll only point out the ones that are not autographed. In fact, I don't think there are any of those left. So all the rest of these, the authors were there and they autographed them for me and personalized them for me. Jeff Strand, Clowns vs. Spiders. This is one I've mentioned, I believe, before on this chapter. I actually picked this up when I was doing the Killer Con virtual con, and I wanted to pick something up from all of the authors who gave talks. This was the one I picked up from Jeff Strand, so he signed it. I brought it and he signed it for me at StokerCon. Same goes with this one, Captured Souls by Sefer Giron. Here's one that a lot of you are familiar with, The Living Dead. This was George Romero's last book. He had started writing it before he passed away. He hadn't finished it, and so it was finished by Daniel Kraus. This is, of course, not signed by George Romero, who had passed before it came out. It is now signed by Daniel Kraus. I also got The New Neighbor by Carter Wilson. Dance Among the Flames by Tori Eldridge. And Elmarie Wood's The Realm. And then I happened to run into Mary San Giovanni, who I've mentioned on this channel before as one of the authors you ought to be reading. And she signed my copies of Found You, which is a follow-up sequel to The Hollower and Chills. Michael McBride, again, who I've mentioned on this channel. I got signed copies of his Unit 51 series, which includes Subhuman, Forsaken, and Mutation. These are wonderful books. I recommend them quite highly. Then this next stack, I have Killer Genius by Stephen Van Patten. By the same author, I have Brookwatter's Curse, Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. By the same author and co-written with Mark L. Abbott, I have Hell at the Waystation. By the same two authors, in addition to Kirk Johnson, I have the sequel to Hell at the Waystation called Hell at Brooklyn T. By one of the same authors, Kirk A. Johnson, I have the Obanax, Other Tales of Heroes and Horrors. From a different author, Denise N. Tapscott, I have Gypsy Kisses and Voodoo Wishes. Let's take the top off of this pile here. I have the new novella, Time Walker by Thomas F. Monteleone, who I had the pleasure of sharing a drink with on Sunday morning. And Tom, if you happen to ever watch this, which I somehow doubt, but if you do, thanks again for the scotch. So that's a treasure. If you don't know who Thomas F. Monteleone is, you really need to look him up. He's one of the greats of the genre. Then I have Liberty Justice by Brett McKay. The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and I know a lot of you are fans of hers, so that's a treasure. I think some of you are going to be jealous that I got my autographed copy of The Winter People. I have Screaming for Pleasure, How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy by S.A. Bradley. He was on one of the panels that I attended, and he had just a few copies of this, so I grabbed one while I could, and he signed it for me. I've also mentioned on this channel before this book, The Jewish Book of Horror. Josh Schlossberg was the editor of this, and he was present, so he signed this for me. Tim Wagoner was also present. In fact, for those of you here on YouTube, he also has a YouTube channel called Writing in the Dark, where he talks about horror writing, and he has a book by the same title, so I got that signed. I also picked up copies of his Little Aqua Book of Marine Tales. This is a series from Borderlands Press. They do these little books, and each one has a color and a theme, and this is Tim Wagoner's. And he also writes a lot of media tie-ins, so I picked up his supernatural tie-in called Children of Anubis. And this takes place, if I recall, yes, it's set after the season 12 episode called The One You've Been Waiting For. So this isn't based on one of the specific TV episodes, but it fits right in with the rest of the series. One I'm not particularly familiar with, but I met the author at the con and picked up a copy, is this Millia Verberu by K.A. Schultz. I don't know much to say about it, but hey, signed book. I'm never gonna complain about that. Then a local author, Thomas C. Mavrudis. I picked up his Bergdorf and Associates, which is a sort of horror noir. And here's one called Urbane Decay by Michael Cieslak, who I also met at the con and spent quite a bit of time talking to. We kept running into each other at odd times, and I ended up picking up a copy of his book as well. Another author I've mentioned many times on this channel is Brian Keene. I have a huge collection of his books, and most of them are already signed. A couple of my copies weren't, so I got him to sign my copy of With Teeth, which is his vampire book, and End of the Road, which is a sort of memoir of one of his book tours. And while I was there, he was also kind enough to give me a copy of Dissonant Harmonies, which he wrote with Bev Vincent. Next up, we have The Boneweaver's Orchard by Sarah Reed. This is a winner of a previous year's Bram Stoker Award and an excellent novel. so I was glad to get that autographed. One of this year's nominees, V. Castro, Queen of the Cicadas, did not win, but is a good book, and she was kind enough to sign that for me. Here's another one that's going to make a lot of you jealous, because I know a lot of y'all are fans. I happened to run into Grady Hendrix in the elevator, and he was kind enough to sign my copy of The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which is an excellent book if you haven't read it yet. Grady Hendrix's works are always a lot of fun, and this is one of the better ones, I think. This is a fun one. I was told about this, and I picked it up just based on the title alone. It's called Man Fuck This House by Brian Asman. I hadn't known originally that he was going to be there, but when I was going through and just comparing my library to the list of attendees, I noticed he was going to be there, found him at one of the tables, and got him to sign my copy. A new one that I picked up is this one called Haven by Tom Deddy. Same goes for this one called It Will Just Be Us by Joe Kaplan. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the awards, the Writer's Workshop of Horror, edited by Michael Nost. This is the first one, and I got him to sign that for me. I don't yet have a copy of the second one, which won this year's Bram Stoker Award, but I'm sure it's just as good or similarly good as this one. F. Paul Wilson, another one of the grandmasters of the genre, was also in attendance, and I already had signed copies of most of his books, but this is one he hadn't signed for me yet. It's called An Enemy of the State. This is actually not horror, this is more science fiction, which he's done horror and sci-fi. This is one of the older works, but I didn't have a signed copy yet, so I brought this one with me and he signed it for me. Here's one called Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. This one I also mentioned in my Best Books of the Year video. This is a wonderful novel about the Satanic Panic. This is actually not an official copy. This is an advanced reading copy that I got before it came out, but he was nevertheless kind enough to sign this for me. He was also kind enough to give me a copy of his new one called The Remaking, which I haven't read yet, but am looking forward to. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the awards, Ellen Datlow, who's a legendary editor in the horror genre. This is not the one that won the award, but this is an anthology edited by Ellen Datlow and Lisa Morton called Haunted Nights. This is an anthology of Halloween-themed short stories, and Ellen Datlow was kind enough to sign that for me. Another one of the nominees was Cynthia Paleo for Children of Chicago. She was kind enough to sign this for me. Another one I had picked up before and brought with me is Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. And finally, one that I picked up, I did not know she was going to be there, but I picked up a new book that I didn't have before, Laura Lee Bear, and this is called Long-Form Religious Porn. I've read her previous work called Angel Meat. Didn't know she was going to be there, so I didn't bring it with me, but I picked up the new one, and she was kind enough to sign that. So, there's my book haul for StokerCon 2022. I think I did alright for myself. What do y'all think? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and bring this to a close. I told you a little bit about what StokerCon was like. It really is sort of like a family get-together for a really weird family of really awesome people. I got a lot of great stuff. The awards banquet was a lot of fun. But at this point, I'm completely exhausted. I did not sleep particularly well over the weekend, partially because I was staying up talking with people, partially because I was drinking the whole time, and partially just because I was sleeping in a strange bed, because even though it was local to me, I stayed at the hotel because no way in hell was I going to try to drive back and forth every day. So I'm exhausted. I need to catch some shut-eye. I also have a lot of books to put away and some new ones to read, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I will say that there's some exciting things happening, so be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, go ahead and click the like button, leave me a comment, and do all those wonderful things. Be sure to ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. I should also point out, I'm also now doing a podcast, which I'm co-hosting with Brian Bonner, who is my colleague now that I've joined Rocky Mountain Paranormal Research Society. The podcast is called Do You Like Scary Movies? I'll leave a link down in the What's It. It's a podcast where we interview interesting people from the horror genre. Our first one is now live, and we're recording more, and there's a lot more coming. I have some other projects in the works that I can't talk about yet, but you'll want to stay tuned for all of them. And as for this channel, I finally finished my master's degree. My thesis ended up being about 400 pages long, which is why I've been a little bit absent these last few weeks. But that's done, so as soon as I sleep off the con and catch up with a few things, I have already outlined several videos, so I have some interesting topics, some reviews, some more theoretical things, lots of fun stuff coming. Again, make sure you subscribe, make sure you stick around, and go ahead and share with your friends as well. For those of you who are new, welcome. For those of you who've been watching for a long time, thank you for watching. And until next time, as always, take care and stay scared.